Hi, I'm Andre Coleman.
And I'm Barry Gordon, and welcome to a special edition of City Beat. Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of City Beat. We have an exclusive interview tonight, which we're basically going to give the show over to. We're very excited. We got to spend about 25 minutes with Congressman Adam Schiff. And I don't think anybody is more in the eye of the storm right now than Adam Schiff, as the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, the top Democrat there. If anyone knows what's going on right now, he does. He can't talk about all of it because some of it's classified. But we just had a wonderful conversation with him that we're thrilled to share with you. And as a result, we're not going to interrupt it. We're going to not have our usual PSAs, because we want you to see the whole thing. So
I think this was just an extraordinary, candid conversation, and he just went off the cuff, let it all hang out, answered every question. I think the viewers are going to love what they see here. So sit back, check it out, enjoy it, and get ready.
Absolutely.
So this morning, the story came out that you were going to prepare a counter memo in response to Congressman Nunez's memo. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and some background is probably helpful, because I know this is really quite mystifying to people. What are these memos about? Basically, what the chairman did was put out a spin memo about a week ago based on very highly classified information that he sought a vote in our committee to release to the House. Now, the House members who wanted to read it had come to the classified space. It was still going to be classified, but it was a deeply misleading memo. And what we have learned this week from the Department of Justice is the chairman never even bothered to read the underlying materials that are characterized in this memo. During the hearing, I made a motion that the committee members be able to read these underlying classified materials, so they wouldn't be voting to put out a misleading document. They voted down their own access to the underlying materials. But in any event, this is part of an effort by the chairman to protect the president, to posit to the membership of the House that there's this terrible conspiracy within the Department of Justice and the FBI. Deeply irresponsible, I think, and a disservice to the men and women who work for the Bureau. So what we have done is we have prepared a memo that actually sets the proper context, corrects all the misstatements, and we will be seeking on Monday to make that available to the House members so they're not misled. Now, will they allow that or not, I don't know, but it seems to me it ought to be very difficult for them to say, we will only let House members of both parties look at this distorted memo. We won't let you look at anything else.
Is this memo fake news, or how would you classify this memo? You have seen it.
I have seen it, yes, of course. And there are only two members of our committee, the entire Intelligence Committee, that have read the underlying materials. Myself, and not the chairman who never bothered to, but Trey Gowdy, the gentleman who brought us the endless Benghazi conspiracy theories. And what this does is it mischaracterizes the underlying materials in a way that is designed to impugn the FBI and belittle the investigation and discredit Bob Mueller through mischaracterization and innuendo. It's not at all unlike the other story from this week, which was a claim by Senator Johnson and Trey Gowdy that these text messages were evidence of a secret society operating within the FBI. Well, it turned out those texts are a joke. I mean, literally, were a joke between these two FBI agents.
Who were having a relationship.
Who were having a relationship, yeah. And part of that same text makes references to calendars. Should they even pass out the calendars? And there was an intimation maybe the calendars are related to the secret, society. Well, those calendars were a gag gift. They apparently were Russian calendars. that they were going to hand out to the people on the squad, and decided it wasn't going to be all that funny anymore. But you know, this is how the Republicans are operating right now, which is attack the Bureau, attack the department, attack Bob Mueller. Don't look too much at what the Russians did. And, you know, God forbid, don't look at what the Trump campaign did in combination with the Russians. Let's see if we can shift attention on the Bureau.
But Devin Nunes had to step down as chair, right?
Well, here's the thing.
That's what I'm confused about. How did he pop up again?
Our investigation began in earnest on March 20th when we had our first open hearing of the committee with James Comey. It was at that hearing that he revealed for the first time that the FBI had opened in July of the previous year a counterintelligence investigation involving people affiliated with the Trump campaign. I also at that hearing gave a very long opening statement that became a thing, which I did not expect it to be, but I laid out the concerns that the American people ought to have with what we knew and what was alleged and how we needed to investigate these issues. The Republicans, I would later come to learn, viewed that hearing as an unmitigated disaster. Certainly the White House did. And it was immediately the following day that the chairman went on what's now become known as the midnight run, when he went to some undisclosed location, obtained what he claimed was evidence of an unmasking conspiracy within the Obama administration, directed the Trump campaign, and went to the White House to present this information to the White House. Well, we would soon learn that actually this was information he got from the White House. This whole thing was cooked up in combination with the White House. He was then forced to recuse himself. Now, the basis he gave to recuse himself was there was an ethics complaint filed against him for disclosing classified information. The real reason, though, that he had to recuse himself was the charade was exposed. And he couldn't credibly lead the investigation if he was going to be essentially shilling for the administration. Now, later when the ethics committee complaint was dismissed, he said, well, I can be back in the investigation now. But the problem never really left the committee, because even when he had supposedly recused himself, he continued behind the scenes to make the consequential decisions, canceling the hearing with Sally Yates and not allowing certain witnesses to be brought before the committee and refusing to subpoena evidence, and instead directing the majority's focus to investigating the FBI instead of Russia.
Can your committee finish its work? It seems like your committee's been the one that's kind of been mired and just kind of stuck in the mud with where it is because of Nunes and the conflicts and all that things. How hard has it been to get the work done there?
You know, the interesting thing is, notwithstanding all the difficulties we have and all the obstacles we've had to overcome, including the chairman, we have been able to actually do a lot of really important investigative work that has contributed not only to our own understanding but to the public understanding, because it's forced other actors like the president's son to make public disclosures of that whole email chain, for example, involving that meeting at Trump Tower. So we've been able to get a lot of good work done. But there's a lot more work that is remaining, and it concerns me that the Republicans are trying to bring our investigation to a halt, even as they try to bring Bob Mueller's investigation to a halt. If they do that, then certain whole issues will go uninvestigated, such as the issue of money laundering, and others will be only half-heartedly looked into, where we don't get the documents we need, we don't get the phone records we need, we don't really have the ability to put two and two together.
So, Congressman Schiff, it looks like Special Counsel Mueller is focusing heavily right now on obstruction of justice. You're a former prosecutor. Some people are coming to the conclusion then that he's getting ready to wrap up. And the question that I have is, do you believe that by focusing so much on obstruction, we're getting a hidden message that maybe the collusion issue is going away, or they haven't been able to prove collusion? Or do you think that he's just decided to go down this road because it's an easier one and he still has work to do on the collusion issue?
I don't think we know what the focus of the Mueller investigation really is. I don't know how we can parcel, okay, X percentage is focused on the issue of collusion or conspiracy and Y on obstruction of justice.
Yeah, the media is certainly trying.
The media is trying to figure that out. Now, how would we know? You know, in our committee we have certain windows of insight, but very little insight into the Mueller investigation. The only people who really know are the Mueller team, and they've done a very good job of keeping their cards very close to the vest, to their credit. And what the White House team can divine based on who they're interviewing, what questions they're asking. Now, a lot of the questions that they're going to ask of the more consequential witnesses that are working in the White House, who didn't necessarily play the same role during the campaign, are going to be involving issues that took place after the campaign. But that, I don't think, should suggest that one issue is necessarily more significant or more weighty or more proof involving one than the other. You know, I will say this, proving a conspiracy involving an adversarial foreign power is no easy job. But then proving obstruction of justice is no easy job either, if that's something the special counsel is investigating, and I can't confirm whether it is or not. These are both very difficult issues. What we ought to hope is that he'll be allowed to do his job, and he'll be able to follow the evidence where it leads, and that we do the same and we make a full public accounting.
Do you expect a report from the Mueller investigation similar to the Starr report, which will actually go to Congress and allow Congress to make its own decision as to whether there should be further action?
This is a really important question, and I don't know the answer to that, because the decision about how much Congress will be made aware of will fall to Rod Rosenstein, ultimately. Mueller's job is different than ours. His job is to figure out were U.S. laws violated and who should be prosecuted and go to jail. Our job is to tell the American people broadly what happened. This is what the Russians did. This is how they did it. This is the involvement of the Trump campaign and the relationship they had to the Russians. And this is what we need to do about it from a policy point of view. We won't be able to do that job unless we have access to all the information. Otherwise, we'll be reporting a very incomplete result to the public, because invariably there are going to be things that Mueller is able to learn that we're not, and there may be some things we're learning that he's not. One guide we have, although it's a very imperfect one, is Rod Rosenstein wrote a memo justifying the firing of James Comey on the basis that Comey spoke too much about the Russia investigation. I'm sorry, about the Clinton investigation. Now, that might suggest that he will only allow Mueller to speak through the form of an indictment. So what will be the case if Bob Mueller finds clear and convincing evidence of collusion, for example, but not proof beyond a reasonable doubt?
Right.
Will it be shared with Congress? Will it be shared with the country? And these are really unanswered questions.
So when we get into an interview with the president and Mr. Mueller, oath or not under oath, I mean, does it just become a big perjury trap? Or is this really an effort to get information? Or how would that work, I guess is my question.
Well, one thing I think we can tell, if these reports are accurate, that there's a negotiation going on about the president's interview, is that the Mueller investigation is further along than we might have thought, because that's something you say for the latter part of the investigation, not the middle or early part of the investigation. Of course, if it led to other things, it could prolong the investigation, but that's the kind of thing you would expect late in the game, or at least late in the investigation. In terms of whether it's a perjury trap or not, I don't really like that characterization. The special counsel needs to interview all the relevant witnesses. It's only a trap if you're prepared to lie to the special counsel, or if you can't keep the truth straight because you've told so many fibs already.
Right.
Then yes, it's a trap, because you've got to try to remember what everybody else has said and what you've said before and not contradict yourself. It's very hard when you just can't simply rely on the truth and can think back, okay, this is actually what happened. So I understand the president's lawyer's concern, because this is a president who has told literally hundreds of falsehoods. That's probably an understatement since he took office. But it wouldn't be a complete investigation without interviewing him. A written response is not going to be adequate. A written testimony is the testimony of the lawyer. We don't want Ty Cobb's testimony or Doug McGann's testimony. We want the president's testimony. And what's more, written testimony doesn't allow you to do adequate follow-up questions in real time. which is when you tend to get the truth. So I don't think there's any reason why Bob Mueller would ever accept a written substitute for that interview. It's going to have to happen.
So going back to the night of the election, if I can just take you back for a second.
Okay, but I'm going to get the shakes.
Well, that's the question.
That's probably the question. You probably just answered it, because my question is literally, what was your response in the exact moment when you realized that Donald Trump was going to become the president?
Well, I think that, like millions of other Americans, I was devastated. I couldn't believe that we had really just elected this reality TV star to be our president, this deeply flawed human being. And I had the most profound worries over what it meant for our future. And I remember going back to Washington and meeting with my staff, who are young and idealistic, and I knew what they wanted of me. I knew they wanted a pep talk, and I just didn't have it in me. And I remember saying to them, I can't, given the PG rating of your show, can't be explicit about it, but
Actually, you can.
Yeah, we don't have a okay. Whatever you want.
I said, look, I know you're deeply worried about what this means for the country and the future, and I just want to tell you by way of encouragement, we're screwed, basically. I said, and then I said in a more serious note, I need time to process what just happened, just like you do, and I promise you I will give you a better pep talk, which I ended up doing. And the reason I was able to do it fairly soon thereafter is I saw millions of people take to the streets, many that had never been active, and say, we're not going to stand for this, and we're not going to let people think that this is what America represents, and we're going to speak out about the values of our country. We're not going back, and that activism and that engagement by people, you know, gave me the confidence to know that we were going to get through this, and we will get through it.
And the day after the
Exactly.
the inauguration, we saw the evidence of that.
And we have never stopped seeing it.
It's true.
I keep coming back, and I share this a lot with my constituents who need a lot of encouragement, like everyone else. Something Bill Clinton once said, there's nothing wrong in America that can't be cured by what's right in America. And there's an awful lot right in this country. It's not as if all those people who voted for Barack Obama suddenly up and left the nation. We're the same country, and we made a terrible mistake. We elected someone who, as many of us feared, was deeply unfit for this office, who lacked not only the basic understanding of what it means to be president, but a fundamental sense of decency. And we have found out in dramatic fashion just how destructive it is when the occupant of the highest office in the land lacks a certain moral compass.
So if the evidence comes out that there were no crimes committed, but it's also crystal clear from the evidence that he has abused power, that he has a fundamental misunderstanding of our country, of the Constitution, can the Congress do anything, and will the Congress do anything?
Well, I think that probably the single most important thing that people in the country can do is change the Congress at that point. There have been a lot of things we've been able to stop from happening, bad things we could stop from happening. But by shedding a spotlight on them, by calling them to the public attention, we were able to save health care for tens of millions of people, for example. But there are certain things you simply can't do if you're in the minority.
Do you think Ryan might let go of the Hastert rule in order to get an immigration package that has bipartisan support?
I am not optimistic about this speaker. This is a time when we need people to stand up for the country and stand up for a system of checks and balances. And one of the most painful realizations of the last year has not been how unfit the president is. We could see that coming. But how pliant and docile the Congress has been, how unwilling members of Congress have been to stand up to this president. when our institutions were at stake. When the President of the United States said we ought to pull the license of NBC because I don't like what they're saying about me, it was a direct frontal attack on the First Amendment. What did the Speaker of the House have to say? Well, I think that I'm a conservative constitutionalist, and I support the First Amendment, and I don't have any further comment to make. It's basically what he said. To which I take it a conservative constitutionalist is someone who is conservative in their support for the Constitution when it's really inconvenient, as it apparently is during this administration. You cannot put much confidence in someone who has that little backbone. There are a few heroes who have emerged in this time of crisis. I think Jeff Flake is one of them. Jeff Flake and I came to Congress together. I have a lot of respect for him. He's someone whose views spring from his faith and his morality. People denigrate Jeff Flake because they say, well, he was going to lose anyway. You know, I want to tell people something about Jeff Flake, who I know very well, I think, now for almost 20 years. He is a very smart guy. He is a very capable politician. If all he cared about was being reelected, he would be well on his way to overwhelming reelection. The reason he's not on the way to reelection, and wasn't on the way to reelection when he decided to retire, is during the presidential primary, he spoke out about the president's unfitness, the candidate Trump's unfitness. But when it became clear, when the writing was on the wall, that Trump was nonetheless going to be the nominee and other members of his party were falling in line, he refused to fall in line. And when he became president and others in his party fell even further in line, and the president was remaking the image of that party in his own flawed image, Jeff Flake refused to fall in line. And that's why he was not on the path of reelection, because it was something he cared about more than simply being returned to the Senate. And I admire that, and I respect that, and I would have thought we would have seen a lot more of that, and sadly we haven't. I talked to John McCain months ago, and I said, I do not understand why there is not a constituency for a single member of the House to be the John McCain of the House. Why is there no member of the House of Representatives willing to speak out like you are? And the sad answer is I think they don't have his character or Jeff Flake's character, and I wish they did.
If you'd been in the Senate alongside Jeff Flake when the vote came to end the shutdown, would you have voted to end it, or would you have joined the minority who said we should not?
I would have voted against it in the Senate as I did vote against it in the House. We've been operating on these temporary kick the can down the road fixes for weeks and weeks. In my view, the Senate got no real commitment to pass the DREAM Act or take up the DREAM Act. We, of course, in the House got even less of a commitment. We got zero commitment from the Speaker to take this up. You have to be massively incompetent as an administration when you control the White House, the House, and the Senate, not to be able to even keep the government open. Yeah. And to those like Mitch McConnell will say, well, we needed to get a few Democratic senators because of the filibuster rule. Do you mean to say that when you control everything, you can't keep the government open if it requires you to get a mere handful of votes from the other side? Why should that be the standard? Why can't you propose something that gets the overwhelming support of both houses? Mm-hmm. Have we really set the bar now to be just whether you can get the absolute minimum level of support of the other party? Do you think, and the other bit of context here is 90% of the country supports the DREAM Act, and 90% of the court, maybe even higher, supported children's health care. These are bipartisan issues that they were holding hostage to the wall. I think it is so immoral to say to these hundreds of thousands of kids who grew up here and don't know any other place but here, we're going to hold your fate hostage to building a wall, which incidentally, the president said Mexico was going to pay for. I say we hold the president to his commitment. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine, you can have your wall, but Mexico's got to pay for it.
That's right.
We will build into the budget Mexico's contribution but we won't put it in U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Do you see another shutdown on February 8th?
I think it's unlikely, but then I thought this one was unlikely. But again, you can never lose by betting against the Congress these days, and you certainly couldn't lose by betting against the administration.
Congressman Adam Schiff, his candor was what was just so refreshing. I mean, so many politicians are guarded. They don't say what they mean. He really did say what he meant through that entire interview. It was so exciting. And there's more that you haven't been able to see that hopefully you will be able to see in a future show where we actually got to talk about more personal things. Because it shouldn't all be about this, but right now, unfortunately, it is. And even after we left his office, there was more news that broke about Trump's plan to fire Robert Mueller. So we'll keep a watch. We're going to keep a watch for you. And we want to thank you for joining us for this special edition. Because we're here to present the news to you as unvarnished as we can, right, Dre?
Yeah, I mean, great interview. If I had to sum it up in one word, I would say he was fearless.
Yes.
He did not hold back. He was not afraid. He said more than we expected him to say, which is always fascinating.
Well, that's it for us. So for Barry Gordon and Andre Coleman, this has been City Beat. Join us next time, please.
Good night.
Good night.